Hello, welcome. Thanks for joining our webinar today. It's great to have you all here. So if anyone that don't know who Northdoor are, we're a consultancy specialising in the storage, protection and usage of data. And as part of that, we're an IBM Platinum partner specialising in power systems. So really to frame the event we've got today, obviously you appreciate we're looking at power systems, IBM I, what's in the future. But looking back, the year we've just had, obviously I think we're getting bored of the word unprecedented and the fact that everything is different, where everything is a new normal. But one thing that has been great for a lot of our customers is having power systems with IBM I running there. In the cases where you've got less people to do potentially more work, having a platform which is reliable, secure, resilient has been a great boon. So what I think we're seeing is some of our customers are looking to maybe change the way they're doing things, reevaluate the way that they're deploying their power systems. So we wanted to try and bring a couple of experts together today to really discuss that. Firstly, where is IBM I going, but equally, where is the power system platform going, and which different ways could you look to deploy that in the future? So first of all, I'm delighted to have Alison Butterill here, Offering Manager for IBM I. So Alison, could I just pass over to you to take on the roadmap of IBM I going forward?
Thanks, Tom, and thanks for including me in this presentation. I'm very excited. My name's Alison Butterill. I'm the Worldwide Product Manager for IBM I. And what that means in IBM terms is that I own the business of IBM I worldwide. I work very closely with our Chief Architect, Steve Will. Steve and I spend a lot of time deciding on how IBM I should work for our clients, for our partners, and for our ISVs. So let me share a little of that information with you. First of all, IBM Cognitive Systems. We are part of Cognitive Systems. And Cognitive Systems has a strategy of doing innovation for cloud, really focusing on application modernization, as well as focusing on the infrastructure to make it resilient, scalable, and secure. And of course, all three operating systems that run on IBM Cognitive Systems really take advantage of those things. IBM I, of course, is one of them. Now, what does that really mean? And you've seen lots of advertising, I know, at sporting events and so on, about IBM's hybrid cloud strategy. What does hybrid cloud really mean for an IBM I client? Hybrid cloud really means we have options. IBM I is the same operating system, whether you're running it on-prem, as shown at the bottom of my slide, or whether you're running it in the cloud, as shown at the top of my slide. Or really, there's another option, which is to run like a cloud, but do it on-prem. We call this cloud-like. Now, hybrid cloud allows us to run the same operating system, the same workloads in any of those three ways. But on top of that, our goal is to provide a seamless movement of workload between those various environments. Now, this is key as we move forward because Steve, Will, and I are spending a lot of our time looking at how we optimize for each of these locations. Again, you can run it on-prem, as we've always done. You can run it in the cloud, or you can run it in a cloud-like environment on-prem. As IBM acquired Red Hat a number of years ago, you can really understand that we are looking at technologies that allow us to manage these three environments. And IBM I works extremely well with some of the Red Hat products like Ansible and OpenShift. And we're developing tighter integration points between those tools and IBM I. We know that many of our clients are looking at those technologies, working with containers, trying to figure out how existing traditional applications will work with those in the future. Now, I know one of the questions I always get asked as we've talked about hybrid cloud and IBM I and all of Power is, how is our overall IBM I business doing? You know, it's an interesting question. We've been in business for over 32 years. IBM I is a very strong business for Cognitive Systems. We have we support customers in over 117 countries. We support over 60 native languages and another 30 as secondary languages as well. Our clients span the gamut. We have very small clients with 5 employees and many of the Fortune 500 customers run IBM I in their environment as well. We have banking customers that run their core banking around the world on IBM I. So all sizes and all industries. Now, of course, we've just come off a very interesting year of 2020, and IBM I actually finished the year 2020 on flat revenue curve. What does that mean? It means that although second quarter around the world across most industries was a tough quarter, we still finished the year on par with the previous year. And we're looking strong in the first half of this year. I believe many of the projects that were slated for clients to do in April, May, and June last year were delayed, of course, as all of the people moved home and tried to figure out how to work remotely. Now, what's interesting is our IBM I clients, and I've heard from many, they all have told us that while they moved home and were working from a home office, many of them were continuing to use the same tools exactly that they use when they're working in their own environment in their office. This is one of the really strong features of IBM I. In fact, one of our advisory council members made a comment about when they moved everybody, all employees, to work from a home office, they worried about whether the employees had networks and whether they had the right laptops and printing and so on, but they never once worried about I. That was a real testament to the quality of what our Rochester development team provides. The next thing I want to do is quickly talk about our strategy. Now, if you have seen Steve, Will, or I present any time over the last 10 years, you will know that our strategy has three main focal points. The first is that we really support our power solutions. Now, these could be solutions that come from an ISV or a solution that you build yourself or a combination. We want to make sure that our customers are able to exploit the latest in every piece of power technology that we provide. That includes the latest in adapters like NVMe storage and the latest storage that comes from our storage team. We also want to make sure that our solutions are able to take advantage of all of the modern technologies like mobile, Internet of Things, cognitive solutions, AI, machine learning. We want to make sure our ISVs have access to that technology as well. Next major point is our openness. Now, about 20 years ago, I remember reading constantly in the press about how IBM I was proprietary and a closed system. For the last 12 years, Steve and I have worked diligently to make sure that we have opened up our platform. We now have more than 350 environments that run on IBM I that are open source. And we have a support option for you as well. Many of our clients are hesitant to adopt open source, knowing that if auditors come in, they want to see a defined support plan. So through our IBM support team, we do offer a support option for open source packages. Additionally, in the last 5 years, the cloud and interest in moving to cloud has taken off in interest. There's a real appetite for examining how IBM I will work outside the data center or inside the data center. We have adopted the technologies and made IBM I work extremely well with things like dynamic capacity. And also we've put IBM I into the IBM Power Virtual Server environment, which is our Power Cloud, if you will. Now, all of this openness, the ability to be in the cloud has really allowed us to attract new people with new talents. This is not the traditional RPG programmer. In fact, if I was advertising for an RPG programmer today, I probably would be doing my company a disservice. What I really want to get is a developer with an extensive toolkit to bring to the table. Those developers that have open source experience and knowledge are able to do things like mobile computing, Internet of Things, connect with other systems, and they understand moving to the cloud. Now, all of that, we still will continue to develop and deliver all of these additional features within the integration of IBM I. After all, I stands for integration. All of the things we've talked about are the capabilities that allow you to deliver all of these new things, the power solutions, take advantage of technology, and open source. These are all parts of IBM I. Now, how will we deliver those? Well, our IBM I roadmap is very, very strong. We are currently the current release is IBM I 7.4, and of course, we still have support for IBM I 7.3. Now, typically, we run about 3 years between releases. So it tells me that in 2016, we had IBM I 7.3, IBM I 7.4 came out in 2019. So I think you can guess approximately the time frame for our next big release. Now, in between, we deliver technology refreshes. And technology refreshes are more than just a PTF fix pack. A technology refresh delivers significant technology enhancements. For example, and some of my favorite ones to give are live partition mobility was delivered in a technology refresh. The ability to move live running workload from partition to partition or server to server was delivered as a technology refresh. Free format RPG was delivered as a technology refresh. This is not a fix. This is new, significant function. So we're already down, obviously 7.4 in 2019. We're already heads down in Rochester and China, our 2 lab sites. They are already coding the next release. In fact, we're getting close to where we're getting to lockdown, which is kind of interesting on our release structure. And we're architecting the next one beyond that. So on my chart, of course, we call them iNext and iNext +1. But what's interesting is the team is already starting to gather requirements for the releases beyond that. So we have a long, strong roadmap. This roadmap is published in our IBM I strategy white paper. And what does that mean? Well, that means that it is a commitment of IBM to our customers to deliver on this roadmap and to show you these releases and provide planning stages for you. So you can know that we have at least 2 more releases of IBM I. And if you know the way we operate, and I've told you we're already gathering requirements for the one beyond that, you'll understand that the roadmap is long and strong. Now, I did want to make a couple of quick comments. As I mentioned before, our strategy white paper has been refreshed this spring. Steve and I rewrote whole sections of it because technology has been moving so quickly. We've updated the AI section as well as the cloud, and so you're able to now read what our strategic outlook is. Now, of course, as soon as it's written, Steve and I joke and say the minute it's written, it's almost already out of date because we announced new things in April, and of course, those things were not necessarily included in our roadmaps, but we try to predict or project what we're thinking will happen in the future. So definitely worth a read. Go to the IBM I webpage and you can download it and read it. Now, one of the other things you might not have seen yet is we have a brand new Forrester Total Economic Impact study about IBM I. Now, let me explain quickly what that is. We engaged with Forrester. We gave them about 6 or 7 customer names who agreed to participate. Now, these customers were interviewed by Forrester on a long, long list for a few hours, all the questions. In fact, some of you listening might have been the ones we contacted. But Forrester used all that information and built a fictitious client. Then they did a study of that client looking at the overall economic impact of running IBM I. It was extremely favorable, and I would encourage all of you to go and read that economic impact. It's something that we have known our clients have been asking for a long time. So how do we explain this financially? We all know the benefits, but how do we explain it financially? So we have a couple of other things that I wanted to quickly talk about. And one of those goes back to my first chart where I talked about the integration of IBM I and Ansible. Now, this is a specific chart and it's talking about IBM I and how we intend to extend IBM I with the Ansible and OpenShift technologies. Now on the left side of my chart, you can see we have IBM I running as it always does and runs so well on VM-based power system. Number of partitions all running IBM I. And many of you, that is the environment you run in today. However, there are a lot of good solutions and a lot of good tools that run in a container-based environment, things like AI, machine learning, Internet of Things. Those things often run in a container. The container running in Red Hat OpenShift, for example, or perhaps just running in a Linux partition. On the right-hand side of my chart, you can see this is a different kind of environment. We have our traditional VM, IBM I, but as well, we're now running Red Hat OpenShift in a Linux partition. Our job in our development lab, in our strategy, is to determine how best to use those containers and make sure that you're able to reach out from existing applications to take advantage of container-based applications as well. That is our job, to make it robust, to make it able to adopt all the new technologies that are coming out. Now, as we go down this path, we'll probably start specifically around the area of DevOps with CI/CD, and that's because of the Ansible product. How do we make Ansible work with traditional applications? So we're going down that path to start with, so stay tuned on that. You'll get to see some more things shortly. So I just want to wrap up with two more charts. The first one is just a reminder, Hybrid Cloud from IBM I. This is really important to understand. This is providing you with options. You can put your workload on-prem, you can put your workload in the cloud, or you can run it on-prem like a cloud. And you can split your workload amongst those environments. You can move your workload from environment to environment. This is the goal of Hybrid Cloud for IBM I. And my last chart that I'm going to talk about quickly is really about client innovation. On the chart, you can see various different company stories. On our website, the homepage that I'm sure you all visit daily, on the homepage, you can link to a number of customer stories. We have over 75 customer stories about really cool innovation. Some of them, for example, the ability to talk to Alexa and have Alexa actually activate and run applications on IBM I. Or how about supplementing a help desk staff by using Watson in the cloud and using Watson to answer standard messages. Tons of information, great innovation. And we always joke and say, you know, we thought we were being innovative in the way we devise and develop IBM I. But man, our clients are so much more innovative than we are. They take the technology we've given them, they blend it with things we never knew about, and the result is incredible innovation, innovative solutions. So with that, I'm going to say thank you again for allowing me to join the webcast. I really appreciate it, and I'll turn it back to Tom. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Alison. That was a really great overview. So one of the things that Alison covered there was that cloud was a key component of IBM I, one of the core principles that herself and Steve Will worked closely on. So with that in mind, we'd like to bring in David Spurway from IBM Client Technical Architect, to talk about how cloud works with IBM. David, can I pass to you?
Thank you, Tom. Most kind of you to have me as part of your event. Really a great pleasure to be able to get the suit back on and actually do these sorts of things again for a change as we head back towards something that's vaguely normal. So a very common conversation I have with customers when we're out talking to them, normally from my caravan or doing other forms of WebEx, is we talk about cloud. We talk about what it means, what it is means to them. And so what we start off with are a couple of standard definitions of what cloud computing actually can be, in that it can often be perceived as something that has to be kind of moving out into public cloud, given on a couple of major cloud vendors such as AWS or Azure. So what I did was I just went into their websites and I went to AWS and I went to Azure to find out what they actually call cloud in the first place. And so as you can see on the slides here, we have first of all AWS is talking about on-demand delivery of IT resources over the internet with pay-as-you-go. And of course, we've all been doing it over the internet for the past 18 months or however long it is now. We've all been working from home. We've all been accessing over the internet. We've not even been in our locations accessing these IT resources from wherever we are. Azure have slightly more words to it. They're going for the delivery of computing resources over the internet, the cloud, to offer faster innovation, flexible resources and economies of scale. Typically, you pay for cloud services as you use them. So again, the kind of advantage you can get from cloud there, the innovation people are looking for, the flexible resources you're looking for, but also again, pay for use as you go along. Next slide if you could. So IBM's definition, IBM's maybe a bit more wordy, that may not come as any big surprise to you at all, but the idea is that again we are seeing on-demand delivery of computing resources over the internet on a pay-for-use basis. Pay-for-use is critical to all three of these definitions. You can see the elastic resources talked about there, you can see the metered services, again, pay only for what you use, and the self-service. So again, the self-service ability, and all of this is quite possible with Power Systems. All of this is quite possible using the services you can get from IBM Cloud. It's quite possible also to be able to get them from the sorts of things that we get from our partners, and of course the sorts of things you can get on premises as well. You don't have to drive off to these particular cloud vendors to be able to get this. You can get these abilities with that pay-as-you-go from a variety of different methods. Next slide if you could. So what is hybrid multi-cloud? These are the sorts of words that we use inside of IBM, but we do know that these different kinds of words, these different definitions can vary depending on what you've actually heard before, and our customers may possibly have different ones. So just to be able to get ourselves on the same page, we start off with the definition of hybrid cloud. So hybrid cloud is where you have some elements of private cloud, some elements of public cloud, and critically, you have data moving back and forth between them. So to be a real hybrid cloud, it's not just multiple different clouds, you're working with data that passes back and forth between them. Multi-cloud is maybe easier. Multi-cloud is extremely common. Almost all of our customers, over 90%, even over 95% of our customers are working with more than one cloud vendor in traditional business. So you probably have maybe Microsoft 365 involved in what you're dealing with. You probably have sort of PowerPoint and Office you're using, and then you have therefore one cloud you're already using. Maybe you've also got Gmail, maybe you have other forms of mail out there on clouds. Maybe that's not the Microsoft ones, maybe that's other ones. There you have multi-cloud, you've got different clouds. But do you have data moving back and forth between these clouds? That's the difference between the hybrid cloud and the multi-cloud. So that's where we come in with a hybrid multi-cloud, is merging the two worlds together. We have multiple different clouds and unrestricted ability to access these across different premises and different vendors. Again, it doesn't have to be driving to AWS or Azure to be able to get to these benefits and get these services. You can get it in a variety of different ways, and hybrid multi-cloud is something we see in almost all of the customers we're working with these days, and we can provide the solutions to enable that. Next slide if you could. So how this can layer up, you've got the multi-cloud architecture, you'll have your particular infrastructure you have already, you'll have the on-prem elements, and that can be the private cloud, that can be virtual machines, physical machines, and of course increasingly it also contains containers. We'll also have the off-prem elements that is very common in solutions these days, to have parts that are on and parts that are off premises, and that can be from IBM, it can be from AWS, it can be from other places, and of course that can also be the sorts of things that can be containers, VMs, other things. Next slide if you could. So how this layers up is that these different areas can have virtual machines and containers, or maybe API connections out to clouds as well. And all these different pieces, be they on-prem or off-prem, can all link together to be able to provide the overall ecosystem that you're actually working with these days. This is something we see in the modernization drives in customers all over the country. And so it's very standard and absolutely part of what we can do with IBM Power Systems, absolutely part of what we can do with IBM I. Next slide if you could. And so the kind of drive that we see people doing this for is that they might be after a variety of different business benefits, advanced capabilities to be able to deliver the kinds of things you're actually after. It could be the sorts of things where we're bringing in artificial intelligence. We'll talk a bit more about that a little bit later on, as you can do new things with that in the near future. So artificial intelligence can be used with data you've got today and be able to give you new business solutions. You could maybe move towards hyper-personalization, so you can actually know exactly what it is you're wanting to give to this particular customer as they come to you at that point, and be very tailored tailored about the actual experience you're delivering to them. Maybe you want to do computer vision. That's something we've been able to do for quite some time now, being able to not just use the sort of standard structured data, but the unstructured form as well. You can deliver tailored business services, but the most common area we see customers wanting to work with is some form of application modernization. The modernization drive is very, very prevalent. We see lots and lots of customers wanting to do that. And again, these different layers of using on-prem elements, using off-prem elements, using the new worlds of containers alongside virtual machines, using API calls out to various cloud services. This is where it's something we see customers modernizing their solutions all over the place. And again, can absolutely be done with IBM Power Systems and IBM I. Next slide, if you could. So as I say, it layers up across these different areas, and so I'll move quickly on from there to be able to look at actually what the modernization shows. So again, if we can click on to the next one if you could, then you've got down the bottom here, you have your different forms of traditional infrastructure you have today. So you've got your on-prem private cloud, that can of course include IBM AIX, and many of our customers do. We're particularly talking about IBM I today on Power Systems, and that can be on-prem or it can be off-prem. We can do either place, and you can run these in either location. Increasingly customers, after all, may well use elements for IBM I, maybe DR out into the IBM Cloud. Maybe they're going to be able to do things, maybe testing of the new versions, and therefore we can do both on-prem and off-prem. Is something that's kind of becoming increasingly popular. Next slide, if you could. So you've got part of this process, the LPARs, as we refer to them. These are sorts of virtual machines that are in other people's parlance. That can be absolutely alongside things like containers. So the containers could be the sorts of things where you might be using IBM's cloud packs. You might be writing your own forms of containers instead to sit upon OpenShift. All these different things are possible. More about that in a second. And they can absolutely be alongside the existing workloads of AIX and IBM I. Very common, a theme that's resonating with the customers I speak to is again this application modernization, where they're modernizing what's going on inside of IBM I. You've got the discussion we've had with Allison after all about the updates you have to the RPG side of things, updating in the RPG world, updating inside of IBM I, alongside a new modernization with containers as well. We don't have to take everything out of IBM I to modernize. We can do both forms of modernization at the same time, and potentially using exactly the same power box. The same power system can run IBM I and also the worlds of OpenShift alongside at the same time. You can also, if you want, have either of these parts, the virtual machines or the containers, could be off-prem in other forms of clouds. Both are quite possible, and you don't have to be restricted at all. Next slide, if you could. So as we say, you've got AIX and IBM I right alongside OpenShift. And again, the reason you might want to do that is the actual performance of the power processors. And again, we'll be talking about the new processors that are coming in the future very shortly. The power processors today and in the future are so much faster than the competition. Faster in this case means you can do more with less. You need fewer licenses for OpenShift, for example. Round about half the number of licenses compared to the on-prem Intel, which of course delivers fairly significant cost savings. Also, when it comes to the off-prem world, if you run OpenShift out on clouds such as AWS or Azure, then normally you don't actually charge for the whole processor. Normally you charge the little half of a thread. And so you can end up with a doubling because they're so very fast, roughly double the performance of Intel with power processors, and then a further doubling because you're not even getting the whole processor, you're getting half of it. And so at least 4 times less expensive to run this kind of OpenShift world on the power boxes at the same time. And as we described, that can be right alongside your AIX and IBM I, all bundled together. Or of course, you can do this with the power processors in the cloud. So you can get the same benefits, same performance with the IBM Cloud should you want to do that. And you have that flexibility, on-prem or off-prem. Next one, if you could. Thank you. And so the way this can work is we can have the cloud packs. We talked about them earlier. Cloud pack for applications is highlighted here. You could also use cloud pack for data if you wanted to, both fully supported in IBM Power Systems, both very, very cost effective on Power Systems because the same kind of benefits I mentioned just a second ago. The very high performance nature of power processors means fewer licenses. The fact that you're actually licensing by the whole processor core means fewer licenses as well. So the IBM Power Systems is very effective for these cloud pack kind of workloads. And you can also use cloud pack for Multicloud Manager. That allows you to be able to manage both the VMs using this thing called CAM, Cloud Automation Manager. It can actually also integrate with Ansible to be able to support the storage. We talked about that earlier as well. And so you can actually see these things tie together, be all part of one overall solution, and they don't have to be off-prem at all. They can all be done on-prem, or we can have elements off-prem and on-prem, and all be brought together using Cloud Pack for multi-cloud management to deliver that kind of modernization through what you're working with IBM I and also the container world at the same time. Next slide, if you could. So this is my version of the Power Systems strategy. This is taken from Steve Leonard, who of course he's the General Manager of Cognitive Systems worldwide, and I just move things around just a little bit to be able to interpret it in my own way. So Power Systems are built for cloud, so that's what they are there for. And again, the point I'm seeking to make here is that you can get the benefits of cloud without having to drive off and leave the premises. You can actually keep the control here. You can actually do this on-prem if you want to. You can also use it in a variety of other clouds. You don't have to go to the hyperscale Intel-based clouds to be able to get the benefits. We see ourselves there for business-critical processes and data anywhere, robust, orchestrated, and trusted. That's what Power Systems are all about. If you're running a workload that, frankly, is not that important, that it doesn't really matter if it goes down, that's not normally where you see Power Systems used. We have been referred to as a kind of niche technology, and I don't really have a major problem with that. You use Power Systems for important workloads, and that's why we use for these business-critical, mission-critical workloads. You get innovation with Power, agility, flexibility, and automation. Again, we talked a bit about Ansible earlier. We'll talk about more later on. You can see that innovation coming through with the other forms of innovation, new Power processors, for example. Application modernization I just talked to. We just explored that. We can use AI with IBM I to be able to get that modernization. You could do advanced analytics. We talked about how you can combine containers with IBM I, those sorts of things, again, delivering application modernization. Resilient, scalable, and secure. That's what Power is known for. That it's the most resilient architecture, IT architecture out there, with the exception of the mainframe, which is in a class of its own. But we outclass all of our competition when it comes to the ability to be able to be resilient, and that's what IBM I has been so good for through these strange and interesting times we've been living through. We know that IBM I is able to just keep on going, be there, be secure, be reliable, and security, of course, is not just is also the sorts of things of being resistant to vulnerabilities from cyber attacks, that we can avoid that as well. So we can do hybrid cloud. I talked a bit about how we can do that. We're able to do that with the IBM cloud. We're able to do that with the AIX and IBM I and Linux, and we're all part of the hybrid cloud solution and link up to other elements that are in other places should we desire. We can do it with Linux. We know we can do that with Linux for certain key workloads, the likes of SAP HANAs, the Red Hats, the OpenShifts, but we'd absolutely do all of this, the innovation, the modernization, the resiliency, with IBM I and AIX as well. It's not just Linux that can get the modernization. IBM I and AIX can be modernized too, so it's across the whole lot. And that's my view of what Power Systems are doing at this point. Next slide, if you could. And so what this is about is, again, one of the solutions we're seeing when we talk to customers is how we can actually do that kind of cloud, the benefits of cloud, we can actually deliver to them on their prem. So we talked about that at the front of the discussion here, all about the fact that it's critical to being able to do a kind of pay-as-you-go kind of process with how you work in this kind of world. That's what cloud is. And again, that's the sort of thing you can get without having to leave the prem at all. So customers are wanting to modernize. They're wanting to be able to modernize their infrastructures, modernize the solutions they're working with, modernize the business services they're providing back, and at the same time you want to lower costs. And none of us have got huge wallets available these days. The interesting times we've been going through mean that we're all a little bit cost constrained, so we need to think about these things, but we can absolutely deliver the two hand in hand at the same time. We can do that with IBM Power Private Cloud with dynamic capacity. That's the solution where you can take one or more Power Box, decide how much you want to permanently activate. You don't have to turn on all the processors and the servers, and that means, of course, you can control the software licensing. You can also have the ability to be able to flex it and move it around and change it by the minute. So if you have a need to be able to grow and then maybe come back down again, then that's quite possible. And that is pay as you go, and that is what cloud wants. And that's what you want from cloud, is to be able to do that, and that's what we can do without having to leave the prem at all with IBM Power Private Cloud with dynamic capacity. It's all managed with the Cloud Management Console. So there's been a number of different sessions on that. Jyoti ran a very excellent virtual user group session on it, and you can find out more detail about that if you want to, about how you actually manage these boxes. And it also delivers other benefits, such as being able to do patch management on these systems moving forward. So this solution allows you to instantly and dynamically respond to changing business needs, and combining flexibility and agility with security, resilience, and performance. That's what it does, and that's what it enables you to do. It can deliver extreme economic efficiency. So what you can do is be very precise about how many processors you actually activate in the servers, right-sizing that initial capex to be exactly the right scale that you've decided you want to do, and then you also have the ability to move back up and down. So you can allow a move to OpEx. If what you have in your business is a drive to OpEx if desired, you can do that. You can minimize that capex, move it into the OpEx kind of world instead, come up and down. major retailers, for example, have found this extremely useful through these interesting times when the shops have had to close, the normal flow of money isn't coming in, but they've been able to use the ability to be able to be flexed like this, grow up and get larger, and that some retailers have had maybe 400% increase in the amount of workload going through their online systems as we've all been at home. That's the sort of thing this solution can handle, because it can come up, and then when we get back to whatever the next new normal, and then you want to come back down again, this is what you can do. You can go in both directions. It's all graphically monitored and planned. That's through the Cloud Management Console. And so if you've got a varying workload, or maybe you're a service provider, or you need pay-as-you-go. Again, pay-as-you-go is the drive we see from most customers wanting to go to cloud, and this we can deliver with the solution. Maybe you've got some older power boxes, maybe you've got some older other things. Maybe CapEx issues have held you back before, and so CapEx can be something that seems a little bit anti-cloud. That isn't what cloud's all about, and that's fine, because we can minimize the CapEx here. We can actually upgrade those older systems and be able to deliver you a new modern solution and be able to be very precise about how that sizing works. So you can contact your IBMer, or alternatively, you can contact your IBM business partner, such as Northdoor, and then we are able to help move this forward.
Thanks, David. That's great. I think it's important to see that distinction between what we've seen in IBM I for so many years, which is a co-location as a service that's been called cloud, to actually being able to achieve cloud that we see on every other platform. So pay-as-you-go, utility pricing by the minute, and it's absolutely something we can achieve now. So it's great to see that. So moving on from that, David, I wonder, can we look at the Power 10? Obviously, we know that's coming out later this year and into next year. What can you share around that?
So yeah, thank you to Northdoor for the opportunity to talk about the things that are coming in the future. That's exactly how we've advertised this after all, and that's what we're going to be talking about now. So it's interesting that we know that I can't pre-announce things. I'm not allowed to tell you things that haven't been announced, and therefore I need to be a little bit careful about what we talk to here. But some things we know, and some things we can talk to, and therefore we can say to these things. So where we started was that last year at the Hot Chips conference in August last year, we announced the processors that we're going to be calling Power 10. What we're working on now is coming up with the solutions that are actually going to be wrapped around those, we know those are going to be coming out in the second half of this year. So you will see servers begin to come out at that point around the Power 10 processors. And what's going to be going on is that we're going to be combining the performance, the security, and also the reliability with responsible computing. So what responsible computing is about is there's a number of different factors. There's a big initiative being run inside of IBM. There's an area of IBM called the Academy of Technology, and they're working on the responsible computing. It extends from a variety of different places into how you build data centers, how you actually do your code to be very energy efficient, and of course it has the direct sort of responsibility of actual energy efficiency of the computing resources you're using. Part of that is actually part of what happens with Power 10. So Power 9's been good. We can actually deliver benefits over and above customers, for such Intel customers, for example. If we virtualize and run our Power boxes very, very efficiently, we can actually use less energy and deliver more performance with Power 9 already today. But what we're also expecting to see with Power 10 coming round in the future is that potentially we might be able to get roughly the same kind of performance for maybe up to 3 times less energy to deliver the same kind of bang. And that means, of course, that Power 10 processors have the capability potentially to be extremely energy efficient, very fast, and energy efficient at the same time. They could be really big. They could be more scalable than we have available today. They could be very large. I don't mean physically. I mean, for the physical space is likely to be similar, but deliver high quality performance, very, very secure building blocks, and may potentially use much less energy. As I say, potentially designed to be able to deliver up to 3 times less energy with the same kind of performance. Very, very scalable. Talk to that. Also, we're going to see not just the processors change and be able to be more performant and more scalable. What we'll also see is memory. So a lot's happening inside the memory subsystems inside the Power boxes. That'll be very interesting for certain workloads such as SAP HANA. Not quite so directly interesting, maybe directly for IBM I, but we will be able to get to the stage of being able to have very, very fast memory. We'll be able to put different types of memory, or as the systems evolve, new forms of memory come along. We're ready for those. We know it's going to be coming in the new forms. We'll be able to use those as well. Very, very fast memory bandwidths, better than we were able to do today. And we're already leading the industry when it comes to how much memory bandwidth we can handle. We'll be able to do even more. We're also going to be, and we'll talk a bit more about this in a slide or two's time, we'll actually be able to do some very interesting things with AI. So what this is about is being able to do AI not on a separate server. Initially with Power 9 we had a different box that did AI. The AC922 was the system that's designed for the big Coral servers. Those Coral projects, after all, they were the ones that were actually used to model what happened with the solutions for COVID. They led the charge to the high-performance computing industry. But that meant you had kind of specialist servers doing AI, and they weren't necessarily the same boxes that had your mission-critical data on them. What we're able to do with this coming forward is that the same systems running your IBM I instances will also be able to run that AI inference directly on the same boxes at the same time. So the data that's actually core inside your IBM I workloads, inside your databases, inside the businesses you're working with today, you'll be able to run AI inference kind of workloads on that really, really fast. The really, really fast is maybe up to 20 times faster than you can do with the Power 9 processors today. That, of course, that's the 20 times. You may also be able to see that being much faster than you're capable of doing things with Intel at all. The 20 times is Power 9. Power 9 is really quick already, and so you'll be able to do AI directly on your data in the same boxes at the same time, using the Power VM virtualization, but also being able to do the AI at the same box at the same time. What we'll also do is continue to enhance reliability. Each generation of systems offering, so Power 10 will be the same kind of thing as we've seen in other systems offerings. It has something called the DOCS methodology, designed for operational excellence. And what we do there is we look to see if we can find areas that have maybe resulted in outages before, be that planned outages or unplanned outages. Power 9 is really, really good at this. It's actually already been, I think it's the 13th year, it's been rated as the top rated reliability system, with the exception of the mainframe, in that kind of world. But we continue to look at that, we continue to monitor it. The number of areas we can actually improve for the unplanned outages isn't very high, but we continue to focus and remove those blockages where we can find them. But we also continue to focus on the reduction of planned downtime. Many of our customers are finding that planned downtime will be more of a challenge than the unplanned, and so we focus on both, and that's what you'll see coming out with the Power 10 systems, is even better reliability, both are planned and unplanned downtime. Also with security. Security is something that's turning up at the board level all over the place. Lots and lots of people talking to security challenges, and the Power boxes are really good at this. IBM I is really good at this. Resilient to all manner of security vulnerabilities. Not entirely about the proof. You need to be able to working with modern versions, modern hardware, modern software, but the orders of magnitude of vulnerabilities in a current Power box is just hugely lower than you would actually see from an Intel or Linux Windows kind of combination. So the journey to Power 10 is made easier with the Power Private Cloud. I talked to that earlier on. The Power Private Cloud is one method by which you can move forward. In that if you were to buy into this now, if you were to get Power 9, for example, you could work with the Power 9 the systems using the Power Private Cloud. That means you can put those things together and be ready for Power 10 and plug on Power 10 when it comes along. You'll then be able to have a level of investment protection. The activations you've done with the Power 9 systems will be able to be moved across in certain ways into the Power 10 boxes. Might be not entirely free, but you'll be able to move them forward and keep your investment, protect your investment for what you've done today in those big boxes that are appropriate for the Power Enterprise pools. We also expect to be able to do this maybe from existing systems. So if you have something like a Power Private Cloud, a Power Enterprise pool today with something older boxes, you're also probably going to be able to do that and plug in the Power 10 box to be able to move that forward as well. They're the bigger systems. And we also have the range of options on the Power 9 offerings for the smaller, more commonly used servers to be able to run IBM I. If you buy into those now, we'll look at commercial processes for how you can actually move forward into Power 10 when that becomes available. So those are the sorts of things which we know about, and just to pick a couple of other highlights from what we announced last year, what we expect to see delivered. If we can look to the next slide, if that's all right. This was what we announced at the Hot Chips conference last year. This is about the performance of the Power 10 processors. As you can see along the bottom there, those are our performance estimates based on the pre-silicon engineering analysis. So we're working towards and working very hard. The team in Austin are working very, very hard to work out exactly what the real numbers actually are right now. But what we know from these kind of models is we'll be able to see not just an improvement in the energy efficiency, but you'll also see significant performance improvements over and above above what you actually are able to see with Power 9 today. So Power 9 has already doubled the performance of Intel on a per core basis, and for a great range of workloads, I will be able to see that performance benefit increase. The numbers you're seeing here are per socket, and so I can't say what the actual ones are for core yet, because we haven't quite got to those at this point, but they're going to be better. They're going to be better than they were with the Intel. They're going to be better than they were with Power 9, and so we'll be able to get better energy efficiency and more performance at the same time, which, given the state of Moore's Law, is not easy, but it has been done in this kind of world, and you'll be finding out more about that very, very soon. And then if we can go to the next slide, if you could. I talked a bit about the AI side earlier, and this is how we're going to do it. So this is actually the sort of thing that puts inside the processor socket itself, right inside the Power 10 core itself, are some new areas that are actually going to accelerate and are designed to run those AI workloads. So previously, kind of AI might have been seen to be something that you did with these things called GPUs, which were outside the processors in a kind of different area, doing something slightly different, and often were done on servers which didn't run IBM I. So here you have the AI workloads are actually going to happen right inside the processor core, and that's what we mean by running these kind of inference workloads on exactly the same box that's running IBM I at the time, right in the core of what's actually running your business, and be so very, very fast without having to come out onto a different system. So that'll be the sorts of things which can deliver these kinds of performance improvements, very, very efficient, very, very high speed. You can also see the kind of optimized efficiency on the microarchitecture for speed we expect to be able to see. You may see up to around about 20% in performance improvement on the actual per thread strength. But again, we're actually modeling and working that out with what's real and not just on the sort of modeled pre-silicon. We're now working out exactly what it's going to be on the real servers, and we'll be bringing that out very, very soon. So AI right in the core of the processors, at the core of your IBM I workloads, and be able to combine the two together for new, interesting business processes. Thank you very much indeed, Tom. I hope that was helpful.
Great. Thank you, David. That was a great overview. It's great to see amazing the gains they're seeing with Power 10. I think the one that you touched on the penultimate slide there around the performance improvement per thread, because we see presets projected for the time being, but where we actually saw that reduce from Power 8 to Power 9 because they were focusing on other areas of chip performance for actually to increase. That's great news for our IBM I customers. So now we've heard about the operating system roadmap, we've heard about the power roadmap. What I wanted to do is just walk you through a recent customer experience we had where we hopefully try and put some of that into perspective. So this one you can see on the slide here. So that this customer is by no means unique in what they're after. So they had a fairly aging power system environment. They were looking to improve their total cost of ownership, their TCO, but that wasn't the major driver. So they had a backup window which was being squeezed and squeezed because they're being forced to run closer to 24/7, and their clients were expecting to access the system more than they were before. And equally, they'd fallen behind, as is not uncommon, fallen behind from an IBM I perspective to a point where the level they're on was no longer supported. So they needed, from a resilience and a requirement standpoint, to get back to a supported release. Okay, next slide, please. So we start off by understanding what does it look like today, and this is what it looks like today. This might be familiar to some of you, or to many of you, I guess, because these were a couple of generations old in systems, so they were pretty large in terms of the footprint, especially of the production server. And one of the key issues here was that this customer was coming from an on-premise location. They were looking to move into a co-location, and so the cost of co-locating all of that data center space was going to be quite prohibitive. So what they needed to do was try and shrink that as much as possible. But equally, we needed to get to a point where the secondary system, as you can see from a footprint perspective, it is considerably smaller, and it's smaller logically and physically. So they were at a point where the production data had grown by organic and inorganic growth by acquisition, to the point where while they could still back up the data at this DR site, they weren't able to have any business continuity if they switched to that secondary site. So they couldn't run the business, or they could only run certain aspects of the business which was no longer acceptable. Okay, next slide, please. So from that, what we can understand is we can put a total cost of ownership together. So how much do the systems cost to run? So if that's maintenance, power and cooling, licensing where that's applicable. And so you can see there's quite big ticket numbers here. Like I said, this wasn't it wasn't all about saving money for this customer, but it was about how do they get to a point where they can offer their customers more usable time from the system. So they were obviously investing a lot of money in this system, but it was spending a proportion of its evenings doing administrative work. And also, how could they get to a point where, regardless if they're running in production or in HA, how could they make sure that the customer journey wasn't affected? Next slide. So as you can see here, what we're able to do we did quite a thorough amount of modelling in terms of performance modelling of the workload they had today. This was a retail customer, so we looked at Black Friday being one of their busiest times of the year. So we took that data, we modelled it down, and we decided that we were quite comfortable in this is Power 9 servers, flash system storage by IBM as well. And as you can see, especially on the production side, they're down from 4 large rack footprints down to just 2 halves. So from a co-location perspective, a humongous saving. Added to that, because they were looking to move into a co-location, they weren't going to be able to change tapes every day. And for a lot of our customers, that's become quite a reality, regardless of where systems are, because we're working at home now. We're no longer able to change tapes as you would have done because you would have been in the office. So this solution also moves to a virtual tape library so that they can be taken, the tapes can be logically cycled, replicated, moved to a secondary site with no intervention by an operator. Okay, next slide. So as you can see, as you probably expect, moving to a new platform, we're able to offer a fantastic reduction in both power, and for this customer, CO2 is important. So the company had a global goal of reducing their CO2 to be environmentally responsible. So as you can see, the right-hand graph is the CO2, and there's a humongous saving there that we managed to do. And the next. And from a TCO perspective, including the acquisition of the new hardware and its maintenance term, you can see actually it pays for itself within the 3-year lifespan. So what they were just going to pay to keep the lights on of the current system, which wasn't providing the resilience they needed, were able to move to brand new systems with which fixes their business continuity issues. It gets them to a supported release of operating system. We also move them to a new disaster recovery system. So they've moved from logical replication, which they were struggling with keeping in sync, up to a Power HA replication system, which is far easier for them to deal with. And all of that is cheaper than just paying for the maintenance and the power and cooling of the existing systems for 3 years. And obviously you can see, for them, being a retailer, they were planning on keeping this over at least a 5-year write-down. So you can see on the right-hand side of that chart, over 5 years, it's almost half of the cost they would have been paying anyway. Okay, next slide, please. And there it is in figures. Great, thank you. So hopefully that's given you an idea of what can be achieved. One thing we'd like to do as a follow-up to this is invite anybody that's interested, either in a TCO study, so we would come and understand your systems and see how that would map onto to a replacement. Not just in terms of what could you do with the financials, but what are you doing today that maybe you've reevaluated and you want to do differently going forward. And that could mean, how do I make the most of the cloud? How do I move? I'm being pushed to move into a hybrid environment. How does that happen? So we can certainly help with that as well. So all there is left to say is thanks very much for joining us today. I hope you found it useful. Just say a big thank you again to Alison and David for taking the time to share their insights with us today. Anything that you found interesting today, whether you want to look at a TCO study, whether you want to look at how your business could take advantage of hybrid cloud, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.